The U.S. is preparing for possible military action inside Venezuela.
President Donald Trump says the United States will strike inside Venezuela, quote, very soon.
December 2025, the Caribbean Sea. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the world's most advanced aircraft carrier, sits 1,500 miles from Venezuelan waters with 15,000 American troops, a dozen warships, and direct orders from President Trump. Prepare for regime change. This isn't a show of force. This is capability positioning. The question isn't whether America should invade Venezuela. Military analysts don't do politics. The question is whether America could pull it off, because despite overwhelming firepower advantages, the math gets complicated fast. Here's what the capability assessment reveals. As of December 2025, this is the largest military presence in the Caribbean since Panama 1989. The Ford arrived mid-November with its full strike group, 5,000 sailors, 75 aircraft including FA-18 fighters, EA-18G electronic warfare jets, and E-2D command planes. 3 guided missile destroyers providing layered air defense. The Ford isn't alone. The USS Iwo Jima Amphibious Ready Group deployed in August, 4,500 Marines with amphibious assault capability. Additional destroyers patrol Caribbean approaches. 1 nuclear attack submarine operates beneath the surface. Total, roughly a dozen major warships, 15,000 personnel, sustained power projection that can operate indefinitely thanks to logistics bases in Puerto Rico. But air power is where American dominance becomes absolute. F-35 stealth fighters have deployed to Caribbean bases. Aircraft Venezuela cannot detect until weapons impact. B-52 strategic bombers flew up Venezuela's coast in November, demonstrating that American planners can hold any target at risk from continental U.S. bases. The Carrier Air Wing brings precision-guided munitions, electronic warfare that can blind Venezuelan radars, and battlefield command systems that integrate everything into one targeting network. Total air dominance, achievable within hours. Add the CIA element. Trump confirmed in October that CIA personnel are conducting lethal operations inside Venezuela. Special Operations Forces, SEALs, Delta, Rangers, are already in region. Task forces in Puerto Rico number in the hundreds. Multiple strikes on alleged drug boats have killed at least 75 people since September. Some analysts assess these as intelligence gathering, mapping Venezuelan response times, identifying command structures, testing defensive capabilities. Conventional military advantages are overwhelming. Geographic proximity. Venezuela sits closer to Miami than Iraq was to Kuwait in 2003. Technology dominance. American satellites read license plates. Electronic warfare disables air defenses, precision weapons hit within meters. American forces have fought continuously since 2001. The question isn't whether American forces can defeat Venezuelan military units. They absolutely can. The question is, what comes next? Panama, 1989, provides the template. Operation Just Cause. 27,000 American troops invaded a country of 2.4 million people. 4 days to topple Noriega's government. Venezuela has 31 million people, 109,000 active military, another 220,000 paramilitary militia of uncertain effectiveness. Scale that math, 100,000 American troops minimum for invasion and initial occupation. More if Venezuelan units actually fight. Current deployment, 15,000. That's an 85,000 troop gap to close. Here's what full-scale invasion actually requires. Air campaign first. Destroy Venezuela's air defense system. Russian-supplied S-300 missiles, radar sites, command bunkers. American stealth aircraft and cruise missiles accomplish this in 48 hours. Venezuelan Su-30 fighters won't survive first contact with F-35s and Carrier Air Wings. Amphibious assault and airborne insertion next. Marines hit coastal targets. Airborne units seize airports. Special operations conduct direct action against regime leadership. Caracas surrounded. Major ports secured. Oil infrastructure protected. Regime decapitation follows. Maduro removed. Transitional government installed. Venezuelan command dismantled. That's the plan. Iraq 2003 followed similar sequencing. Shock and awe, regime collapse, victory declared. Then, reality hits. Venezuela isn't Iraq's open desert. Mountains, jungles, dense urban terrain that negates American technology advantages. Caracas holds 2 million people in a valley surrounded by mountains. Urban warfare means buildings provide cover, civilians complicate targeting, snipers replace tank battles. Now here's where invasion planning becomes impossible. Oil infrastructure is where invasion planning gets complicated. Venezuela holds the world's largest proven oil reserves, 300 billion barrels. That's more than Saudi Arabia. That oil is why Trump is interested. That oil is also why invasion becomes a nightmare. The infrastructure isn't concentrated. It's dispersed across 3 major zones. Maracaibo Basin in the west produces nearly half of Venezuela's output. Lake Maracaibo holds offshore platforms, onshore wells, processing facilities. The Paraguana refining complex on the coast, one of the world's largest refineries, processes 940,000 barrels daily. Orinoco Belt in the east contains the heavy crude reserves. Facilities stretch 400 miles along the Orinoco River, upgrading plants, pumping stations, pipeline networks connecting to ports. Eastern offshore platforms in the Caribbean complete the picture. Dozens of wells, subsea pipelines, coastal terminals. American forces face an impossible choice. Destroying oil infrastructure is militarily simple. Precision strikes disable refineries, pumping stations, export terminals. Days, not weeks. But Venezuela's economy runs on oil exports. 7 million Venezuelans have already fled economic collapse. Destroy the oil sector, trigger complete state failure. 20 million people without income. No tax revenue, no government services. Mass starvation. The humanitarian crisis becomes America's responsibility. Protecting oil infrastructure is logistically impossible with current force levels. Paraguana refinery alone requires battalion-level security, 800 troops minimum to prevent sabotage. Maracaibo facilities need another 5,000 troops. Orinoco upgrading plants, 3,000 more. Pipeline networks stretching hundreds of miles. Another 10,000 soldiers manning checkpoints and patrol routes. That's 18,000 troops just securing oil infrastructure, before counting forces needed for cities, ports, borders, and fighting insurgents. The math doesn't work. Current deployment, 15,000 total personnel. Oil security alone requires more troops than America currently has in theater. Supply lines stretch across mountainous terrain with limited roads. Fuel, ammunition, food, medical supplies, everything moves by convoy, vulnerable to ambush. Colombia shares a 2,000-kilometer border. Colombia's President Petro opposes American military action. Without Colombian cooperation, American forces face maritime and airborne insertion only. Operationally possible, but logistically constraining. Timeline based on historical precedents, initial strikes, days to weeks. Shock and awe phase. Regime collapse, weeks to months. Iraq took 6 weeks. Afghanistan against Taliban took 8 weeks. Venezuelan military leaders profit from drug trafficking and corruption. They have financial incentives to fight, not surrender. Stabilization, months to years. Iraq and Afghanistan demonstrate what happens when stabilization fails. Venezuela's economy has collapsed. 7.9 million people have fled. Infrastructure has decayed. Rebuilding while fighting insurgency requires years and hundreds of billions. Iraq's invasion cost exceeded $2 trillion. Venezuela suggests comparable expenditure. So here's what the numbers actually reveal. The United States can defeat Venezuela's military. That's not in question. The real gap isn't military at all. Troop numbers: current 15,000. Requirements 100 to 200,000. That's mobilizing and supplying up to 185,000 additional troops while maintaining existing global commitments. Regional opposition: Colombia, Brazil, Mexico all oppose American military intervention. Brazil calls Latin America a zone of peace and has tripled military presence on borders, not to support invasion, but to contain refugee flows. Colombia suspended intelligence cooperation. Mexico opposes foreign intervention on principle. Without regional cooperation, American forces lose land access routes, intelligence sharing, logistics support, and post-war political legitimacy throughout the hemisphere. Post-invasion chaos. Remove Maduro, face insurgency from hundreds of thousands of armed colectivos, paramilitary groups loyal to Chavismo embedded in communities who know the terrain. They won't surrender because the regime falls. Iraq and Afghanistan proved military victory doesn't equal strategic success when insurgency follows. Oil infrastructure vulnerability. Venezuela could sabotage refineries, pipelines, and ports rather than let them fall under American control. Reconstruction takes years and billions. Without oil exports, Venezuela's economy fully collapses, triggering humanitarian catastrophe requiring American reconstruction aid. These problems multiply faster than troops can deploy. 7.9 million Venezuelans have already fled. Invasion triggers the largest migration crisis in Western Hemisphere history. Millions more pour into Colombia, Brazil, and toward the U.S. southern border. The border security crisis Trump campaigned on solving explodes exponentially. Brazil and Colombia won't provide bases or intelligence. They might actively oppose operations. No Colombian cooperation means no land invasion routes. Regional institutions fracture. The Organization of American States collapses. Latin American nations that spent decades escaping U.S. intervention see confirmation that Washington hasn't changed. Russia, China, and Iran maintain military cooperation agreements with Venezuela. They won't defend Maduro directly, but they provide intelligence, diplomatic support, and post-war complications. Can the United States invade Venezuela? Militarily, yes. The deployed forces can destroy Venezuelan military capability, topple Maduro, occupy major cities within weeks. Adding 100,000 troops creates force projection no Latin American military can contest. Strategically, invasion leads to protracted insurgency, regional isolation, catastrophic migration, oil infrastructure destruction, and trillion-dollar costs over decades. What America can do: maintain naval blockade indefinitely, conduct precision strikes on military targets, support internal opposition, escalate sanctions targeting regime elites, seize Venezuelan assets globally. What America cannot do sustainably: occupy and stabilize 31 million people, prevent mass migration triggering border crisis, operate without regional ally support, guarantee oil infrastructure survival, sustain domestic political support for another forever war. Military capability exists. Strategic wisdom doesn't. This capability assessment matters because it affects three different groups. Trump campaigned on ending forever wars. Venezuela starts one. Defense analysts compare this to Iraq: easy invasion, impossible occupation. Congress has introduced war powers resolutions blocking invasion without authorization. Maduro uses American threats to consolidate support and justify repression. His military stays loyal because they profit from drug trafficking. Economic collapse continues. War creates millions more refugees. Latin America views American military intervention as imperialism. Regional cooperation on migration, drugs, and trade deteriorates. China and Russia expand influence as countries seek alternatives to U.S. dominance. Strategic costs exceed military benefits dramatically. The United States has 15,000 troops, carrier strike capability, and complete air-naval dominance. Conventional military victory is assured within weeks. Regime change requires 100 to 200,000 troops, regional cooperation that doesn't exist, stabilization plans that failed elsewhere, and acceptance of trillion-dollar costs plus thousands of casualties. The capability gap isn't military, it's strategic. America can invade. It cannot win the peace. It cannot prevent catastrophic regional consequences. It cannot sustain support. Verdict: military capability without strategic wisdom guarantees Pyrrhic victory at best, generational disaster at worst. I'll continue tracking US-Venezuela developments as this crisis evolves. For military capability assessments cutting through political rhetoric, subscribe and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching.